The emergency beacon tore through the fabric of space itself, carrying a signal so desperate it made hardened military officers stop dead in their tracks. In the depths of Nord's classified levels, where Earth's most guarded secrets lived behind walls of steel and silence, the transmission materialized like a ghost from humanity's worst nightmares. Ambassador Lyra's holographic form flickered into existence. Her alien features twisted with terror that transcended species barriers. Her forearms trembled as interference from dying communication relays scattered her image like broken glass. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of entire civilizations crying out in their final moments. "Please," she gasped, static, crackling around each word like the death rattle of worlds. "The Shadow Fleet has consumed 17 star systems in just 6 weeks. Our children? Dear gods, they're harvesting our children alive, processing them into biological components for their war machines." Admiral Jack Harrison had seen enough warfare to turn most men's hair white. But the footage streaming behind Lyra's desperate plea made his blood freeze. Massive black ships, each one pulsing with organic weaponry, descended on peaceful colonies like mechanical vultures. The screams that echoed through the transmission weren't just alien voices, they were the universal language of terror that every parent understands. You know that feeling when you're watching a horror movie and you want to yell at the screen? When you see the characters making decisions that'll get them killed? That's exactly what Harrison felt watching these galactic empires try to fight the Shadow Fleet with conventional tactics. Except, this wasn't entertainment. This was genocide on a cosmic scale. Captain Jessica Carter, Harrison's razor-sharp intelligence chief, stepped closer to the holographic display. Her analytical mind was already processing threat assessments, while her human heart recoiled from the implications. "Ambassador," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding before them, "help me understand something. The Vorthan Empire commanded fleets that could glass planets from orbit. The Stellar Republic had technology that bent space-time itself. What makes you think Earth, a species that just figured out faster than light travel 50 years ago, can succeed where these galactic superpowers failed?" The question hung in the recycled air of the command center like a challenge to physics itself. Around the room, Earth's finest military minds waited for an answer that would either justify hope or confirm their worst fears about humanity's place. In a universe gone mad, Lyra's desperate gaze swept across the assembled human officers, taking in their scarred faces and steely expressions. These weren't the polished diplomats or theoretical strategists she'd grown accustomed to in galactic politics. These were warriors who'd earned their ranks in blood and fire, who understood that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to become exceptionally good at war. "'Cause," she whispered, her voice breaking like a dam under pressure, "we're the only species in the galaxy that has never surrendered. Ever. We've studied your historical records. Your species fought wars against impossible odds for 10,000 years before you even reached the stars. When faced with extinction, you didn't just survive, you thrived. You're our last hope because you're the only ones crazy enough to think you can win." The silence that followed was profound enough to hear the hum of the base's fusion reactors. 3 levels down, Admiral Harrison studied the tactical displays with the intensity of a surgeon examining a patient's vital signs. 30,000 enemy ships stretched across the star charts like a cancer eating the galaxy alive. Each shadow vessel was larger than Earth's most massive battlecruiser, their biomechanical hulls pulsing with alien hunger. But here's what separated Harrison from every other military commander in galactic history. He wasn't looking at those ships as an impossible obstacle. He was looking at them as a logistics problem that needed solving. And humans, as it turned out, had gotten very good at solving problems that other species considered impossible. The Admiral's weathered hands traced the enemy formations on the holographic display, his tactical mind already working through scenarios that would make lesser mortals wake up screaming. His steel-blue eyes that had seen the aftermath of orbital bombardments and the quiet dignity of soldiers' funerals, but never left the data streaming from the dying worlds. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of a man who'd made life-and-death decisions for so long that the weight of command had become part of his DNA. But there was something else in his tone, something that made even his own battle hardened. Staff shift uncomfortably in their seats. Ambassador Harrison said, each word measured like ammunition being loaded into a weapon. You came to the right species. But I need you to understand something before we proceed. He turned away from the displays, his gaze meeting Lyra's terrified eyes with the kind of certainty that had carried human armies through impossible battles for millennia. The promise in his voice wasn't just confidence, it was the sound of a predator recognizing prey. You might not like what happens next. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees, and even Captain Carter felt a chill run down her spine. Because in that moment, everyone present realized they weren't just witnessing the beginning of a military campaign. They were about to see why humanity had clawed its way to the top of Earth's food chain and then decided the entire universe needed protecting. But what exactly did Admiral Harrison have in mind? Would the Shadow Fleet's next victim survive long enough to find out? The Pentagon's Situation Room had hosted presidents through world wars, nuclear crises, and humanity's first steps into space, but nothing had prepared its reinforced walls for what was about to unfold. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension, as holographic displays painted the conference table in blood-red tactical overlays, each blinking light representing millions of lives hanging in the balance. President Michael Thompson sat like a statue carved from American granite, his weathered hands folded as he absorbed briefings that would have broken lesser men. Around him, the nation's most brilliant military minds worked with the deadly precision of a surgical team, preparing for the operation of a lifetime. But this wasn't about saving a patient. This was about deciding whether humanity would stand by and watch genocide, or remind the universe why. Earth's children had never learned the meaning of surrender. General Patricia Davis, her uniform decorated with ribbons from conflicts most civilians had never heard of, spread tactical projections across the table like a dealer laying out cards for the highest stakes game in galactic history. Her voice carried the clinical detachment of someone who'd spent decades turning chaos into strategy. But even she couldn't hide the tremor of rage beneath her professional composure. Mr. President, she began, her words falling into the silence. Like hammer blows, the Shadow Fleet operates on a principle so simple, it's almost elegant in its horror. Total consumption. They arrive in a system, strip mine entire planets down to their molten cores, harvest every single living organism for biological components, then move to the next target like locusts with starships. Admiral Harrison stood at attention beside the holographic nightmare, his steel blue eyes never leaving the tactical displays. If you've ever watched a chess grandmaster study a board before making the move that ends the game, you'd recognize that same intensity burning behind his gaze, except this chess game was being played with solar systems as squares and entire species as pieces. The president's voice cut through the room's tension like a blade through silk. Casualties? Harrison's response hit the room like a physical blow. Confirmed dead across 17 star systems, 4 billion sentient beings. Men, women, children, entire civilizations processed into raw materials for their war machine. He paused, letting that number sink in before delivering the knockout punch. Intelligence projections suggest that if their current rate of consumption continues unchecked, the entire galactic population will be extinct within 24 months. 4 billion dead. Try to wrap your mind around that number. It's more than half the population of Earth wiped out in 6 weeks. And that was just the opening act of an extinction event that made humanity's worst nightmares look like bedtime stories. The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop in the next county. Secretary of Defense Robert Kane, a man who'd spent his career preparing for humanity's worst-case scenarios, leaned forward with the intensity of someone staring into the abyss. What are our options, Admiral? Please tell me we have more than prayers and good intentions. That's when Admiral Harrison's expression shifted into something that would have made a great white shark nervous. His smile carried all the warmth of interstellar space, and when he spoke, his voice held the promise of violence that had carried human armies through impossible battles since the dawn of civilization. Sir, I recommend we show them exactly why humanity spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of warfare before we ever left our home planet. They want total consumption. We'll give them something they've never encountered in their entire evolutionary History, total war, waged by a species that learned to kill efficiently by practicing on each other. Captain James Mitchell, Earth's leading xenobiology expert and the man who'd decoded more alien DNA than anyone alive, activated a series of displays that would have been classified beyond top secret just hours earlier. His analysis of shadow fleet biology revealed something that changed everything these creatures had evolved as apex predators. In a universe full of prey, intelligence analysis confirms they've never faced organized military resistance, Mitchell reported, his scientific objectivity barely containing his excitement at the implications. Every species they've encountered either fled in panic or was overwhelmed before they could mount an effective defense. Their entire tactical doctrine is based on overwhelming force against defenseless targets. President Thompson's response carried the weight of American history from Valley Forge to Normandy to the asteroid belt campaigns, and they've never met humans. Admiral, you have my complete authorization. Show them what happens when someone threatens our friends. Harrison's salute was crisp as winter morning, but his eyes held the promise of summer lightning. Yes, sir. Operation Righteous Fury is officially authorized and active, but here's where things got interesting in a way that would have made Sun Dazu himself take notes. As alarms began wailing throughout Earth's military installations, from orbital defense platforms to submarine bases hidden beneath polar ice, something unprecedented began happening. Humanity wasn't just mobilizing for war. We were about to demonstrate why our species had conquered an entire planet before breakfast, and then decided the rest of the universe looked lonely. Ambassador Lyra watched from the observation deck as Earth's war machine came alive with terrifying efficiency. Massive shipyards that had been building peaceful exploration vessels suddenly retooled themselves for something far more sinister. Launch platforms that had been sending colonists to distant worlds now bristled with weapons that violated several galactic conventions on civilized warfare. She had asked for help, desperately hoping these strange bipedal creatures might buy her people enough time to evacuate a few more worlds. What she was witnessing was humanity preparing to solve the shadow fleet problem permanently, with interests compounded by 10 millennia of military evolution. But as Earth's fleets began their dark journey toward the galactic core, one question burned brighter than fusion drives cutting through the void. Would the Shadow Fleet's next victims survive long enough to witness humanity's answer to genocide? And more importantly, would anything recognizable be left of the Shadow Fleet when humanity finished teaching them about the food chain? The universe was about to learn why humans had never needed to surrender. We'd always been too busy making the other guy quit first. The hyperspace distortion rippled through New Haven's peaceful solar system like a stone thrown into still water. Except this stone was carrying 200 nightmare creatures that had devoured civilizations older than Earth's sun. Captain David Reynolds felt the familiar weight of command settle on his shoulders as reality tore open around the mining colony, revealing an armada that blotted out the stars themselves. From the bridge of the TNS Vengeance, Reynolds watched death emerge from the void, with the calm detachment of a man who'd made peace with impossible odds years ago. His destroyer hung in space like a lone wolf facing a pack of titanium-clad bears, each shadow ship pulsing with biomechanical weaponry that could crack planets like eggs. The math was simple and brutal. 1 human vessel versus 200 alien predators that had never known defeat. Lieutenant Emma Brooks, her fingers dancing across sensor controls with the precision of a concert pianist, delivered the news that would have sent any sane commander running for the nearest hyperspace jump point. Sir, enemy fleet composition confirmed and analyzed. We're looking at 200 capital-class bioships, each one approximately 3 times the mass of our destroyer. Conservative estimate puts us at 42-1 odds. Now, here's where most species in the galaxy would have done the smart thing and retreated to fight another day. Hell, most human commanders would have done the same thing. But Reynolds wasn't. Most commanders, and the Vengeance wasn't just another ship. They were the tip of humanity's spear.
Ow!
And spears don't retreat, they punch through whatever stands in their way. The mining colony of New Haven spread across the planet below them, like a glittering jewel, home to 12 million souls who'd never fired a shot in anger. Families sleeping peacefully in their beds, children dreaming of birthday parties and summer vacations, workers heading home from late shifts in the extraction facilities, all of them blissfully unaware that their next few minutes would determine whether they lived to see another sunrise or became raw materials for an alien war machine. "Communications," Reynolds ordered, his voice carrying the kind of casual authority that came from 20 years of turning impossible situations into tactical victories. "Open channels on all frequencies. Let's see if our new friends understand proper military etiquette." The lead shadow ship responded with a display that would have been beautiful if it hadn't been so terrifying. Bioluminescent patterns raced along its organic hull like electric veins, pulsing with colors that human eyes were never meant to see. The ship's translation matrix converted the alien message into something that hit every human officer on the bridge. It's like a sledgehammer to the gut: submit or be consumed. Ever wonder what separates humans from every other species that had faced this moment? Most civilizations heard that ultimatum and started calculating evacuation routes or drafting surrender terms. Reynolds heard it and started planning how to make these alien bastards regret ever leaving whatever cosmic sewer they'd crawled out of. His response echoed across subspace with the authority of 10,000 years of human warfare distilled into pure defiance. "This is Captain David Reynolds of the Terran Defense Force. You have exactly 60 seconds to withdraw your forces before we demonstrate why humans are the most dangerous species in this galaxy. This is your only warning." The bridge fell silent, except for the steady hum of tactical computers calculating firing solutions and the quiet breathing of officers who'd trained their entire careers for this moment. 60 seconds stretched like an eternity while 200 alien predators processed the audacity of a single human ship threatening an armada that had consumed star systems. The Shadow Fleet's answer came as a wave of destruction that would have vaporized most ships before they could blink. Acid spitters, bioplasma cannons, and weapons that didn't have names in any human language converged on the vengeance like the wrath of angry gods. Any reasonable captain would have died in that moment, along with his crew and his ship. But Reynolds smiled with the grim satisfaction of a man about to reveal humanity's greatest tactical advantage. "We don't fight fair, and we never have." "Fire pattern Omega," he ordered, his voice steady as bedrock. "Here's where things got interesting in a way. That would rewrite every tactical manual in the galaxy." The Vengeance didn't return fire at the enemy fleet. Instead, its weapons batteries swiveled toward New Haven itself, launching a carefully calculated spread of seismic charges into specific coordinates that had been mapped and analyzed months earlier. You see, New Haven wasn't just a mining colony. It was a mining colony built on top of an unstable planetary core that human engineers had been studying for years. And humans, being humans, had wondered what would happen if someone gave that core a little nudge in exactly the right spot. The planet didn't just explode, it performed like a precisely engineered weapon that had been disguised as a celestial body. Billions of tons of refined metal or industrial chemicals and military-grade compounds erupted outward at velocities that turned physics into poetry and poetry into death. The entire solar system transformed into a kill zone that made supernovas look like firecracker displays. The shadow ships evolved to consume organic matter and crush conventional resistance, found themselves shredded by hypersonic debris clouds that carried toxins specifically designed to target biomechanical systems. Their living hulls dissolved while their mechanical components were pulverized by metal fragments moving at relativistic speeds. Within minutes, an armada that had terrorized the galaxy was reduced to expanding clouds of cosmic dust, with only 2 heavily damaged vessels limping away through hyperspace like wounded animals fleeing a forest fire. "Captain?" Reynolds opened a channel to Earth Command with the satisfaction of a man who'd just taught the universe a lesson it would never forget. "Admiral Harrison, this is Reynolds reporting mission completion. Enemy casualties: 198 confirmed kills. Human casualties: 0. New Haven colony successfully evacuated 2 backup facilities as planned, per Operation Omega protocols." But the real message that reached the Shadow hive mind was simpler and infinitely more terrifying. Humans didn't just fight like every other species in the galaxy. They thought like apex predators who'd spent millennia learning that sometimes the best defense was turning everything around you into a weapon. The universe had just learned that humanity's greatest strength wasn't our technology or our courage. It was our ability to look at any situation and ask the one question that separated us from prey: how can I use this to kill you first? And somewhere in the cosmic dark, the Shadow Fleet was about to discover that they'd picked a fight with the wrong species entirely. The Shadow Overmind had witnessed the birth and death of stars, consumed civilizations that bent space and time to their will, and devoured technology so advanced they could rewrite the laws of physics on a whim. For 10 million years, it had swept across the cosmic rim like a plague of living starships, turning entire galaxies into feeding grounds. But in all those eons of perfect predation, it had never encountered something that would fundamentally challenge its understanding of the universe. Prey that didn't just fight back, but fought dirty. The news of New Haven's destruction rippled through the hive mind, like poison spreading through veins of living metal. 200 ships veterans of 1,000 conquests, seduced to cosmic debris by a single human vessel, and a mining planet turned weapon. The collective consciousness that had never known defeat suddenly tasted something alien and bitter. Uncertainty. Admiral Razin stood on the bridge of the TNS Retribution, watching sensor displays paint a picture that would have driven lesser minds to madness. The enemy's response stretched across multiple star systems like a cancer-given form. 50,000 ships emerging from the dark between galaxies, each one pulsing with the hunger of 10 million years of successful predation. Colonel Mark Stevens, a man who'd fought in the Martian Rebellion and lived through the siege of Europa Station, found his voice reduced to something barely above a whisper. Jesus Christ, Admiral. They've brought everything they have. He wasn't exaggerating. Biotitans the size of Earth's moon drifted through space alongside destroyer-class organisms that could crack continents. Swarms of fighter analogs darkened. Entire star systems, their numbers so vast they've registered on gravitational sensors as massive objects warping space-time itself. It was the kind of armada that civilizations built legends around, except this time the legends were about the civilizations that got eaten. Ambassador Lyra stood among the human officers like a ghost haunting her own funeral. Her alien features drained of color as she processed what her desperate plea for help had unleashed. "Admiral," she stammered, her voice carrying the weight of species-ending dread. "This is their entire military force. Every ship they possess across multiple galactic arms. I've never committed this many resources to a single engagement." Know that moment in chess when you realize your opponent has been playing a completely different game than you thought. That's exactly what was happening here, except the chess pieces were starships and the board was mapped in light years. Harrison's response carried the casual confidence of a man who'd spent decades turning impossible odds to tactical victories. "Good. That means we only have to kill them once." Commander Lisa Park, her fingers dancing across tactical displays with the nervous energy of someone calculating humanity's survival chances, looked up from her station with the expression of someone staring into an abyss that was staring back. "Sir, preliminary analysis shows enemy fleet mass advantage of approximately 1,000 to 1. Even our most advanced weapon systems can't generate sufficient firepower to commander." Harrison interrupted with the tone of a teacher about to demonstrate why humans had never needed to surrender activate Project Pandora. Now, here's where things got interesting in a way that would make Prometheus himself nervous about stealing fire from the gods. Throughout the human fleet, cargo bays that had appeared to contain standard military supplies began opening like mechanical flowers blooming in the vacuum of space. But what emerged wasn't ammunition or spare parts. It was something that violated every treaty on civilized warfare that the galaxy had ever signed. Chief Engineer Tom Watson, a man who'd helped design Earth's most classified weapon systems, reported with the clinical detachment of someone unleashing technological nightmares. "Sir, all ships confirm Pandora protocol is fully online. Self-replicating manufacturing systems are deploying as planned. Each human vessel had been secretly converted into a mobile weapons factory, capable of producing armaments that weren't just advanced, they were evolutionary. Nanoscale viruses designed to turn biomechanical systems against themselves. Hunter-killer. Drones that learned from every engagement and adapted their tactics in real time. Self-replicating minds that bred in the vacuum of space like metallic bacteria. The Shadow Fleet arrived expecting to find humanity's final desperate stand-a handful of primitive ships making a last heroic gesture before inevitable extinction. What they encountered instead was an automated nightmare that built itself faster than they could destroy it. A war machine that grew stronger with every passing moment. Picture this. You're fighting what you think is a single opponent. Time you land a hit, two more appear. That's exactly what the Shadow Fleet faced, except those opponents were learning from every mistake and getting deadlier with each iteration. Within the first hour, nanoscale weapons had infiltrated the bioholes of shadow vessels, turning their living components into weapons against their mechanical systems. The creatures that had spent eons consuming other species suddenly found themselves being consumed from within by microscopic predators, designed by a species that had learned biological warfare by studying viruses on their home planet. Within 3 hours, hunter-killer drones had analyzed Shadow Fleet tactics and begun producing countermeasures faster than the hive mind could adapt. Weapons that had conquered galaxies found themselves obsolete. Against an enemy that evolved its defenses in real dash time, by the 6th hour, self-replicating minds had spread throughout the battle zone like a three-dimensional minefield. It grew more dense with each passing minute. The Shadow Fleet's numerical advantage became a liability as their own ships created more targets for weapons that bred in the void. Admiral Harrison opened a communication channel to the surviving shadow vessels, his voice carrying the authority of a species that had clawed its way to the top of one planet's food chain and decided the entire universe needed the same lesson. This is Admiral Jack Harrison of the Terran Defense Force. You wanted to see how humans wage war? Congratulations, you are getting the full demonstration. He paused, letting the sounds of their dying armada fill the void between stars, before delivering the knockout punch that would echo through the cosmic dark for eons. Now you understand why we conquered our entire home planet before we even reached the stars and why we never learned to surrender. We don't just win battles, we end threats permanently, and you, unfortunately, have become a threat to our friends. The Shadow Overmind, a collective consciousness that had existed since before Earth's sun ignited, experienced something completely alien for the first time in 10 million years. The cold, creeping realization that it had finally encountered something higher on the food chain, but as humanity's technological plague continued consuming the greatest armada in cosmic history. One question burned brighter than dying stars. Would anything be left of the Shadow Fleet to learn from this lesson? And more importantly, what would humanity do with a universe that finally understood why Earth's children had never needed to kneel? The answer was spreading through space at the speed of self-replicating nightmares, and the cosmos would never be the same. The silence in the rebuilt Galactic Council chambers carried the weight of 10 million years of terror, finally lifted from the shoulders of civilizations that had learned to sleep with one eye open. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Proxima Centauri. 6 months since humanity had demonstrated why Earth's children didn't just win wars. They ended them so thoroughly that future generations would study the aftermath in hushed, reverent tones. Ambassador Lyra stood at the podium where she had once begged for help, with tears streaming down her alien features. But today, her voice carried the steady strength of someone who had witnessed the impossible become inevitable. The chamber around her buzzed with representatives from worlds that had been written off as lost causes, species that had spent decades hiding in the dark corners of space, waiting for the Shadow Fleet to find them and reduce their civilizations. 2 biological components. Honored delegates, she began, her words echoing through chambers that had been empty tombs just months before. I stand before you today to announce that the human fleet has successfully eliminated the final shadow stronghold. After 10 million years of galactic predation that consumed entire star clusters, the threat has been completely and utterly eradicated. The word eradicated hung in the recycled air like a bell tolling the end of an age. This wasn't just military victory, this was extinction warfare carried out with the methodical precision of a species that had learned efficiency through 10,000 years of practicing on each other. The humans hadn't simply defeated the Shadow Fleet, they had hunted down every bioship, every spore, every microscopic trace of the Overmind across 3 galactic arms, with the relentless determination of antibodies eliminating a cosmic infection. Veteran diplomats who had negotiated ceasefires with species that ate their own young shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Because what Lyra was describing wasn't just warfare, it was the complete erasure of a threat. So thorough that future xenarchaeologists would have to work overtime. Just to prove the Shadow Fleet had ever existed, the chamber doors opened with ceremonial precision, and Admiral Harrison entered, wearing his dress uniform. Every medal and ribbon gleaming under lights that had been dimmed for decades, while civilizations cowered in the dark. The assembled aliens fell silent as he approached the podium, not out of respect, but out of the primal recognition that they were in the presence of something that had fundamentally changed the balance of power in the universe. You know that feeling when you're in a room with someone who's just accomplished something legendary? That electric tension when everyone knows they're witnessing history being made? That's exactly what filled the chamber as Harrison took his place at the speaker's platform. Honored delegates, he began with the casual authority of someone who'd just completed the largest extermination campaign in galactic history. The Shadow Fleet no longer exists in any form. All previously occupied worlds have been liberated and are undergoing rehabilitation. Our xenobiological teams have documented 23 species that survived in hidden refuges during the occupation, and we've provided full assistance for their resettlement. Outservex of the Altarian Republic, a diplomat who'd survived first contact with 17 different hostile species, chose his words with the delicacy of someone diffusing a bomb made of pure diplomatic tension. While we're eternally grateful for your thoroughness in addressing this threat, many of us are deeply concerned about the precedent this sets. The weapons you deployed, the tactics you used, they represent capabilities that frankly terrify those of us who remember galactic history. Harrison's expression never flickered, but something in his steel blue eyes suggested he'd been waiting for exactly this question. You're afraid of us. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact delivered with the matter-of-fact tone of someone reading a weather report. The chamber held its collective breath like a jury waiting for a verdict that would determine whether the universe became a safer or more dangerous place. Let me make something crystal clear, Harrison continued, his voice carrying the authority of a species that had united an entire planet under one flag and then decided the rest of the cosmos looked lonely. Earth could have built walls, hidden behind our planetary defenses, and watched from safety while the Shadow Fleet consumed every living thing in this galaxy. We could have calculated that their expansion would take centuries to reach human space and used that time to prepare our own defenses. He paused, letting that hypothetical timeline sink into minds that were already calculating what humanity could have accomplished with centuries of preparation and no moral constraints. But when innocent people who had never done us any harm, people who shared nothing with us except the basic desire to see their children grow up safe, when those people called for help, we answered. Not because we love war, but because we love peace so much that we'll do absolutely anything to protect it. The truth hit the chamber like a tactical nuke detonating in slow motion. These weren't conquerors drunk on their own power. These were guardians who had weaponized compassion and turned it into the most efficient killing machine the universe had ever seen. You should be afraid, Harrison said, his words cutting through diplomatic pretense like a plasma torch through tissue paper, but not of us. Be afraid of what happens when decent people decide they've had enough of watching evil triumph. That's what you witness human beings who looked at genocide and said, "Not on our watch." President Thompson's voice crackled through the communication array from Earth, carrying the weight of a planetary government that had just appointed itself guardian of galactic civilization. The Terran Defense Force is establishing permanent patrol stations along the galactic rim and at strategic points throughout inhabited space. Any species that threatens civilian populations will face the same fate as the Shadow Fleet. This is not a negotiation, it's a promise. As Admiral Harrison prepared to leave, he turned back to face the assembled representatives one final time. We didn't ask to become the galaxy's guardians. Hell, most of us would rather be back home building cities and writing poetry. But sometimes good people don't get to choose their burdens, they just have to carry them. The chamber doors closed behind him with the finality of a coffin lid, leaving behind a room full of beings who were grappling with a new reality. Humanity had just declared itself. The immune system of galactic civilization, Ambassador Lyra realized. She was witnessing something unprecedented in cosmic history. Species so devastatingly effective at warfare that they chose protection over conquest, guardianship over empire. The galaxy was infinitely safer now, but it was also fundamentally changed in ways that would ripple through time like waves from a dropped stone. Outside the council chambers, the stars seemed brighter, their light no longer dimmed by the shadow of inevitable extinction. But somewhere in the darkness between those stars, human warships maintained their vigilant watch weapons, capable of ending civilizations guided by minds that understood the true cost of peace, and were willing to pay it in other people's blood. Universe had learned that mercy and violence could coexist in the same heart, and sometimes the greatest kindness was the promise of absolute destruction for anyone who would harm the innocent. The Shadow Fleet was gone forever, but the memory of Earth's response would echo across the cosmos for millennia to come. Never mistake human restraint for human weakness, and never, ever, threaten what humans choose to protect. The end.